This year, the number of participating in the annual blood drive was 9,000. Each year, the number of citizens participating will increase by 10%. So, I'm going to start with 9,000. And I'm going to add 10% of 9,000. So I'm going to add 10, and then I'm going to type the percent. It gives me the of, and then I just put 9,000. And that tells me 9,900. Well, then I'm going to take 9,900, and I'm going to add 10% of 9,900. Because this is my new value after 1, so I want to know what 10% of that number is now. Which I get 1,000 or 10,890. So now I'm going to take 10,890 and add 10% of 10,890. So we'll take 10,890 plus 10% of 10,890, and we get 11979. And if I wanted to get the next number, I would take 10%, 10%. Well, here, what is the question? What is this moving by? What's the common multiplier? Well, the other day we talked about if I want to find the multiplier, I'm going to take this guy and divide it from this guy. So I'm going to keep going that direction. So if I say 11979 and divide that by 1080 and 90, so let's do this. We're going to say 11979 divided by 10890, and I get 1.1. I bet you if I do 10,890 and divide it by the number above it, which is 9900, I get 1.1 again. So here's my common multiplier, 1.10. So here's what we can say. If my percent of increase is 10%, my starting amount was 9,000. Okay, my growth factor, which is my common multiplier, is 1.1. So my equation will be this and this. So I'll take 9,000, 1.1, and yesterday we talked about we will raise that to the power of x. So if I type this, it should give me that whole table over here. So let's see. Y equals 9,000, 1.1 to the power of x. And if I turn this into a table, it should start giving me those values right there. And they do. Here they are. Right? If I hit enter, there's the next value. And I can find any value at this point. Okay? So what about if I had a 40% increase, still starting at 9,000? What would that be? Well, this would read 1.40. So 9,000. And we are adding 40% each time. or multiplying 40% each time. Okay, we could do a different one. Say it was a 30%. And maybe it started at $850. Well, my multiplier would be 1.30. So I'd have 850, parentheses, 130 to the power of x. Right? Say I had 65%. Well, what would that be? 1.65. I don't know, where do you want to start it at? Maybe it's $100 that it starts at. So we start at 100, and this is growing by 65%. All right, I don't know, maybe it's a 9%. What would that be? 1.09. Maybe it starts at, I don't know, $400. So $400, and it's growing 9%. Okay. What if this was 10%? I'm just making something up. What would be the equation? Y equals, we start at our 2,000. My multiplier is 1.28. Well, then what does my percent have to be? It can't be 10%. I can't just make that up. No, it would have to be, well, that says 28, so this is actually going to be 28%. 4%. Well, that's going to be 1.04. Why not 1.40? Because 1.40 is 40%. This is 4%. So this one would read y equals 17,000. I wouldn't write any commas when the equation or the function. Okay, so this would be 1.04 to the power of x. Right? If this is here, then if I can go backwards. This would be 1,500. You want to put it in money. 1.01. So what is that really? Well, it's not 10%. That is 1%. Okay, how would you write this one? Maybe you can start seeing the pattern. 1.065. So this would start at $8,500, no commas, and we are growing by 6.5% each time. Okay, suppose the number of citizens was at 9,000 for the blood drive. Okay, so again, I'm at 9,000. Okay, but now, instead of increasing, we're going to decrease by 10%. What is that? Well, that just means that now we're going to take 9,000 and we're going to subtract 10% of 9,000. So I'm going to clear out what's over here. And we're going to say 9,000 minus 10% of 9,000. So that's 8,100. Now I'm going to take 8,100 and take 10% away from 8,100. And I get 7,290. Again, I would take 7,290 minus 10% of 7,290, and that'll give me the next number. And I get 65 and 61. So, what is my multiplier? Well, let's do this. Take 6561 and divide it by that 7,290, the number above it. So, 6561 divided by 7290, that's 0.9. And I bet you if I take 7290 and divide it by 8,100, That also gives me 0.9. So we're going to write it like this, 0.90. So if I am decreasing at 10%, because that's what we had, then my factor is 0.90, and my starting amount was 9,000. So my equation would be 9,000, 90% to the power of x. Okay, well, what if it was 20%? What would I have? 0.80. Maybe we still start at 9,000. Because I'm taking 10% away. Now I'm decreasing by 20%. So what's technically left is 80. Right? Say it's 40%. Still starting at 9,000. So what would this be? 60% that's left that you keep. All right, let's try some different numbers. Maybe something like, I don't know, 35%. What would that be? Maybe we'll start at $100. Starting at $100, 35. Well, think of it like 100. If you take 35 away from 100, right? 100 minus 35, well, that's 65. So this would be 65. Okay. Oh, this is 0.97. So if it's 0.97, then what is that really? It's decreasing by 3%. So this would read y equals, starting with 2,000, with a 3% decrease. If it's a 4% decrease, 96. So this one's starting at 17,000, and it is going down by 4%. So you have 96% left. If this is 0.84, think of it this way. What is 100 minus 84? 16. So this would read 16%. And it's starting at and if I'm 2.5%, you can think of it like this, right? 100 minus 2.5, it's 97.5, so we're going to write it this way, 0.975. So y equals 500, 0.975, because you're always taking it away